Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udhiraye Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. So last week we had completed our discussion on 1328, one of the main verses of the chapter, and Srimad Bhagavatam, and 1329, which was essentially the answer to the sage's question about the various incarnations of Krishna. So in the answer to that question, Sutta Goswami, he had spoken about first the three Purusha avatars, and then in the next set of verses he had spoken about the 22 Leela avatars, and ended with the sutra, the Paribhasha Sutra verse, which basically pointed us to Krishna as being the source of all the incarnations. So after this, the next section of the chapter starts, in which Sutta Goswami will continue about his discussion on the topic of the various incarnations of Krishna. So we will read the verse 1-3-30. Etadrupam bhagavato hayarupasya chidatmanaha maya guner virachitam mahadabiratmani. The conception of the Virat, universal form of the Lord, as appearing in the material world is imaginary. It is to enable the less intelligent and neophytes to adjust to the idea of the Lord having form. But actually, the Lord has no material form. So in the next 10 verses, from this verse 30 till 39, Sutta Goswami will speak about how the pure devotees of the Lord, or rather how the devotees of the Lord, they realize the Lord in the, how the devotees of the Lord, they realize the Lord in the gross and the subtle conceptions, especially through the process of Shravana Kirtan, that of Bhakti. So this verse seems to be a little bit of a non sequitur, because if you see the sequences, then Sutta Goswami spoke about the Purusha avatars, and after that he spoke about the Leela avatars. Then he says, then he talked about Etijam Sakalapumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, that all these incarnations come from Krishna. And now he's speaking about the conception of the Virat form of the Lord as appearing in the material world is imaginary. So it looks like it's a little bit of a break in the flow. But if you look at these answers in the broader context, that Sutta Goswami is answering the question that was the fifth question that was put by the sages, that please tell us about the different incarnations of the Lord. So then it makes sense. So in answer to that, he spoke about the Purusha avatar, he spoke about the Leela avatar, he spoke about the Swayam Rupa, which is Krishna, Bhagavan Swayam. Now he's speaking about another form of the Lord, which is the Virat Rupa. So in the rest of the chapter, that is what Sutta Goswami is going to be speaking. So in these two verses, 30th and 31st, Sutta Goswami will be talking about the ability to see Krishna in matter, or ability to see spirit in matter. Then from 32 to 34, he will speak about the ability to see everything as spirit, which is, so 30 to 31 is the Virat Roop, 32 to 34 is the Brahman realization, 35 to 39 he will speak about the next level of realization, which is Paramatma and Bhagwan, and 40 to 44 he will speak about yet another incarnation of Krishna, which is the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, after having spoken about the Purusha Avatar, the Leela Avatar, the Swayam Bhagwan, then the Virat Roop, the Brahman, the Paramatma, the Bhagwan, and the literary incarnation of Krishna, which is the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, Srila Prabhupada says that even though Sutta Goswami speaks about the Virat Roop, it is not really an incarnation. So he says the conception of the Lord, known as the Vishwaroop or the Virat Roop, is particularly not mentioned within the various incarnations of the Lord, because all the incarnations of the Lord mentioned above are transcendental, and there is no tinge of materialism in the body. There is no difference between the body and the self as there is in the conditioned soul. The Virat Roop is conceived for those who are just neophyte worshippers. So, even though just in terms of the sequence, it may appear that the Virat Roop is an incarnation, but it's not an incarnation, it's an imaginary roop. It is not spirit, it is material. And what it actually does is that it enables the materialist to have the first introduction to Krishna. So because the materialists are so strongly anchored in the material conception, they are not able to see beyond that. So when they say, show me God, then having them jump that leap of faith that God is not matter but spirit is difficult. So as the first stage, they are showed that matter is God. So later on, there is more description of the Virat Roop, but essentially, it is seeing God in nature. That the sun and the moon are the eyes, that the trees are the hair, the river are the veins, the mountains are the bones. So these are all things that one can see and appreciate. And then one is basically said that all these actually belong to the Virat Roop, so it is relatively easy for them to make that transition. So the Virat Roop is material, and because it is material, it is also temporary. But because Krishna is being assigned to Krishna, it does not mean that Krishna is material or Krishna is temporary. So one should not make that inverse extrapolation. That I see matter around me and it is material, and because that is Virat Roop, so Krishna is also material. That if sun and moon are his eyes, then eventually when the universe is destroyed, the sun and moon also gets destroyed. So Krishna also gets destroyed. And this is so Prabhupada writes in the very first verse of the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada writes, the external manifested energy in the form of material existence is only temporary and illusory, like the mirage of the desert. So in order to explain that a little bit, Prabhupada gives the analogy of our own body. So he says that the soul is sitting in the body, but one who does not have a strong spiritual conception can relate to the body. Does not mean that the body is spiritual, but at least the person is able to recognize the symptoms of the soul that are appearing in the body. the sensience, the consciousness, the intelligence. These are all symptoms of the soul that are appearing in the body. So in the same way, the Virat Roop by itself is not spiritual, but because one is able to see that it is enlivened by something within, one can then make that connection. So in the next verse, Sutta Goswami, he will elaborate a little bit more on how can one make this distinction and what it is predicated on. So we'll do the next verse, 1331. Yatha nabasi meghago renurva partavo nile evam drastari drastavyam aropitam abuddhabi. Clouds and dust are carried by the air, but less intelligent persons say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, they also implant material bodily conceptions on the spirit self. So previous verse, Sutta Goswami had talked about Virat Roop, and in this verse is cautioning us against implanting the spiritual conception on the material Virat Roop. So why is the Virat Roop being presented if it is not an incarnation of Krishna? Because it almost appears that Sutta Goswami, as soon as he has presented it, is beginning to caution us that don't think upon it like that, do not consider it to be spiritual. And the analogy that he uses in this verse, it helps us understand why is he doing that. That he says that a sky may appear cloudy, but the sky has nothing to do with the clouds. The air may appear to be dusty, but it has nothing to do with the dust. Similarly, the Lord may appear to be material, but he has nothing to do with matter. So factually speaking, there are clouds in the sky and there is dust in the air. That observation is not in error. The error is considering the fact that the clouds in the sky are covering the sky, or the dust in the air is an intrinsic quality of the air. So similarly, seeing spirit and matter is not incorrect. That is the notion that Sutta Goswami is giving us to help. But what is incorrect is considering spirit to be material. So you follow that by this analogy. What he is saying that it's fine if there is dust in the air. It's fine to see the dust. If there are clouds in the sky, that is also fine. But the fault is that just because there is clouds in the sky, you consider the sky to be cloudy. Or just because if there is dust in the air, you consider the air to be dusty. Because neither the sky nor the air have anything to do with the clouds or the dust. They are two different things. So similarly, because matter is Krishna's energy, it is fine to see Krishna in matter. But it is not correct to consider Krishna to be material. And the fact that matter is also an energy of Krishna, Sutta Goswami will actually elaborate on that when he will talk about Krishna's mercy. So that is why he's also wanting to make this point here, because so to speak, material aspect of Krishna is what will actually help us transcend the material barriers of our existence. So, some more understanding on this is that a doctor may quote a medicine with sweets, something sweet, and give it to a young boy to eat it. So the boy might not take the bitter medicine because he doesn't like the taste, but he might take the sweet medicine, and in doing so, he will drink it. So a materialist may be attracted to matter, so he will eagerly take the conception of Virat Roop. He may not take the notion that spirit has nothing to do with matter. He will not be ready to reject matter so quickly. In the purport, Prabhupada gives another analogy. Prabhupada says, for instance, there is a particular gentleman goes in the car, which can be seen very easily. We identify the car with the man. We identify the car with the man within the car. When the president goes out in this particular car, we say, there is the president. For the time being, we identify the car with the president. So the car is actually not the president, but because the car is closely associated with the president, then we can consider the statement not to be untrue, that there is the president. So Prabhupada says, similarly, less intelligent men who want to see God immediately without necessary qualifications are shown first the gigantic material cosmos as the form of the Lord, although the Lord is within and without. Okay, so we'll go to the next verse, 1.3.32. Atah param yad avyaktam avyuda guna brahmitam adrashata shruta vastuvad sajivo yad punarbhavaha. Beyond this gross conception of form is another subtle conception of form, which is without formal shape and is unseen, unheard, and unmanifest. The living being has his form beyond this subtlety, otherwise he could not have repeated births. So, previous verse, 2 verses, Sutta Goswami had spoken about the Virat Roop, which is the gross conception. And now he is saying that beyond this gross conception, there is a subtle conception, which is without formal shape, unseen, unheard, and unmanifest. And the next line is actually Sutta Goswami trying to help us relate to that, saying that we, the living entity, we also have a subtle form. And how do we know there is a subtle form? Because there is repeated birth. If we had just a gross form, then at the end of the life, the gross form is burnt and our existence would have terminated at that time. But because we have life beyond the end of the body, we know that beyond the gross form, there is a subtle form. So in the same way, beyond the gross conception of the Virat Roop, there is a subtle conception. So Prabhupada gives a practical example that even when the gross body is not acting, when the living being is in sound asleep, we know that he is within the body by his breathing. So the living beings passing away from the body does not mean that there is no existence of the living soul. It is there. Otherwise, how can he repeat his births and again and again? So if somebody might say that who knows what happens after death, that whether the soul takes birth again. So Prabhupada says, okay, but at least you can witness people sleeping. At the time when they are sleeping, the gross body is inert. It is inactive. Yet, there are several bodily functions that continue and the gross body can be revived. So what is the continuum? It is the subtle body. So the second part is an analogy for us to understand the first part, that beyond the Virat Roop, there is a subtle body. So can anybody hazard a guess, what is this subtle conception that Sutta Goswami is speaking about in terms of the Virat Roop?
The Brahman.
The Brahman. Thank you, Mataji. So, the next level of realization that Sutta Goswami is taking us to is the Brahman realization. So, again, the analogy only works till a certain level. For us, the subtle body is material. It's made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. And when our material existence comes to end, the subtle body also goes away, which means that the subtle body is material. But the Brahman is spiritual. It is all-pervading, eternal, non-dual spiritual substance that is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam 1-11 as Jnanam Advayam, the non-dual truth. So within the Virat Roop, Sutta Goswami is now taking to us to the next level of realization, which is the Brahman realization, and this becomes the step to subsequent higher forms of realization. So we'll go to the next verse. Yatre me sad sadrupe pratishta sva samvidaha avidyatmani krite viditid brahma darshanam. Translation: when a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and the subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as the Lord. So Sutta Goswami has, so you see that he was talking about the Virat Roop, then he talked about the subtle body. In order to understand the subtle body, he directed our attention to our own subtle body, and now he actually picks up on that thread, and he says that when we are able to, so initially he introduced us to a subtle body just to explain to us the parallels, that we have a subtle body, Krishna has a subtle body within the Virat Roop, which is the Brahman, right? But now he takes it to the realization level that when a jiva, especially when a conditioned jiva, is able to see that the gross and the subtle body have nothing to do with the pure self, which means that the gross and the subtle body have nothing to do with the spirit soul, which is the pure self, then he sees himself as well as the Lord. So this is analogous to the rising of the sun. When the sun rises, then the person sees the sun, the person sees himself, and he sees everybody around him. So similarly, when the jiva, the conditioned jiva, his spiritual realization, the knowledge of his spiritual realization becomes more and more apparent, then he sees himself, Atmagyan, that I am not the body and the subtle body. He sees Krishna, that Krishna is not matter, and Krishna is spirit, and he sees the other jivas around him. All these three things will happen simultaneously. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that when meets the self by proper culture, the activities of the self begin. Therefore, a man who is engaged in the activities of the self is called Jivan Mukta, or a liberated person, even in the conditional existence. So, in his so Preeti in Jiva Goswami in Preeti Sandarbha, he comments of this verse, and he explains that a person learns the truth about the gross and the subtle body through self-realization. And what is this self-realization? That neither the gross nor the subtle body has anything to do with the self. So when one has that realization, one sees the self and one sees the supreme. So Srila Prabhupada mentions in his purport, all this is executed by the Lord either through his external potency or directly by the internal potency. So we can understand that all this could be done by Krishna's internal potency, because it is said that as we make spiritual advancements, we come under Krishna's internal potency. But Prabhupada over here mentioned that could be done through his external potency or directly by his internal potency. So can anybody try and explain this statement? So Prabhupada has said it has to be true, but can we understand that essentially what Prabhupada is saying, that a conditioned soul, we could make spiritual advancement under Krishna's external potency. How is that possible?
Can you repeat the question, Prabhu? Sorry.
So the question is that in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, all this, so all is pointing to the liberated vision, the spiritual vision of the jiva, that the person is able to see the self as the soul, the person is able to see Krishna as the supreme. So Srila Prabhupada says all this is executed by the Lord either through his external potency or directly by the internal potency. So the question is that we understand the internal potency is Krishna's spiritual energy, how that can enable us to see. But the general conception is that the external potency is Krishna's bewildering potency. So how is it that Prabhupada says that even Krishna's external potency can help us see all this?
By giving us troubles and difficulties.
By giving us troubles and difficulties. Okay, anything else? Can you give an example of that, Mataji?
So when the devotee is following spiritual path, if, for example, if there is a death in the like the devotee is not very serious in practice, practicing devotional service, but they're doing something to get them become more serious. There could be various instances can happen with the devotee, or with their family or something like that, that can basically be a trigger for the devotee to get more serious in their spiritual life.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other thoughts?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I was just thinking external potency, when we try to dovetail that to Krishna's service. For example, our own body or any paraphernalia that we try to worship Krishna, the food that we offer, the bhoga, it's all part of the external potency. But when that is dovetailed towards the service to Krishna, to please Krishna, then it becomes part of the internal potential.
Okay. So both are very good answers, and Sutta Goswami will actually give the answer to this question in the next verse. So let's read the next verse, and and see what our Sutta Goswami has to say about this. Yadyaye suparata devi maya ve sharadi matai sampanayevati vidur mahimni swamahiyate. If the illusory energy subsides and the living entity becomes fully enriched with knowledge by the grace of the Lord, then he becomes at once enlightened with self-realization and thus becomes situated in his own glory. So this verse, it explains that so the first part of it is very obvious, and I guess that's why it wasn't mentioned, that because the external potency is the one that is covering us, Krishna helps us by withdrawing the external potency. So he may not be putting us within his internal potency, but he withdraws the external potency. And so the Goswami is saying that the illusory energy subsides. That is Krishna's Maya Vaishradimati. So that is Krishna's external potency. So once his external potency has withdrawn, then it helps us make spiritual advancements. So this is Krishna. So Krishna's external energy has this service of, so sometimes we say that Maya has a service to keep us in the material world. And that's not a fully accurate statement. Symptomatically it may be, but Maya's actual service is to make sure that the qualified jivas enter the spiritual world. And those who are not qualified stay in the material world. So it's like there is a prestigious university, they have an exam, 10,000 people sit into it and 100 people are selected. So the purpose of the exam is to select the 100 people. The fact that it rejects the 9,900 people, that is incidental. Like sometimes they say that exams and interviews are not meant to reject you, but they are meant to select you. We reject ourselves, but the exams are there to select us. So similarly, Krishna's external potency is there to select us. Those who are qualified, then the external potency withdraws, and one becomes enriched by knowledge. So Prabhupada in the purport says, the same energy acts as his external, internal and marginal energies, and by his omnipotency, he can perform anything and everything through the agency of any of the above energies. So Prabhupada is including us also. That just like Krishna is controlling his internal and external potency, he is saying even the marginal potency. And we know that once we become devotees, then Krishna takes control of us. He put Arjuna into illusion, he put Parishit Maharaj into illusion. He will put his devotees in different situations, and he controls them for his own Leela. But not until we are surrendered to him. So Prabhupada continues, he can turn the external energy into internal by his will. Therefore, by his grace, the external energy, which is employed in illusioning those living beings who want to have it, subsides by the will of the Lord in terms of repentance and penance for the conditioned soul. So this is how the external energy is helping us. That when it actually subsides and converts into repentance and penance. So what is the repentance about? The fact that we have turned our back to Krishna. What is the penance for? Purifying us from our material situation. So later on Prabhupada gives the example, and Prabhupada has this ability to give very apt analogies. So he gives an example of the electrical energy. And he says an expert electrician, he can use electric energy for heating or for cooling. Same energy, but based on some adjustment, you can use it for heating and for cooling. Similarly, Krishna's energy is the same. There's no difference between Mahamaya and Yogamaya. The difference is how we approach it. When we approach it for the purpose of self-enjoyment, then the same energy becomes Mahamaya. When we approach it for service to Krishna, the same energy becomes Yogamaya. In the appearance pastime of Krishna, when Yashodamaya had a daughter, so the daughter is called Yogamaya. But when she came over to Mathura and Kamsa tried to kill her and she escaped from Kamsa's hand, at that time she took the form of Mahamaya. Same person, but for the Brajvasis she was Yogamaya, for Kamsa she was Mahamaya. For the Brajvasis, she was enabling their pastimes with Krishna. For Kamsa, she said that death is inevitable for you. Same energy. The difference was how it was approached. So, so expanding a little bit more on these two things, the repentance and penance. So, Ajuta Mataji gave a very nice example of how when there is a death in family, then it is something that is material, but a devotee can use it for spiritual purposes. So there is something that is known as Shamshan Vairagya, that when people return from the crematorium, they're inevitably philosophical, because they have witnessed the end of life. The most materialist person becomes philosophical, and an aspiring spiritualist can actually use it to establish a stronger spiritual conception. The Srimad Bhagavatam has an example of, and Burijan Prabhu, he gives two examples in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The first example is Parikshit Maharaj, that he was cursed by Shringi to die in 7 days. Completely material interaction. He did something under the influence of Maya to insult a sage. The son of the sage got angry and cursed him that he will die in 7 days. Completely material. Then what did Parikshit Maharaj says? Sadhu mene. He says, well and good. This is the best thing that could happen to me. And what did he use that situation? To make spiritual advancements. 7 days he fasted and heard the Bhagavatam and made himself spiritually perfect. So this is how one uses one's repentance and regret to get away from the material, convert the material situation into spiritual. Another example is given in the 3rd canto, and this is that of Mahatma Vidur. So Vidur was always trying to reason with Duryodhan, and at one point he speaks very strongly to Duryodhan about the way that he is interacting with the Pandavas. And Duryodhan at that time becomes very angry, and he chastises Vidur. He calls Vidur a dog, that you're being untrue to the master, and deeply insulting words spoken by somebody who has a very inferior position, both in terms of relationship and realization, very inferior position. But what did Vidur do? He said, very good. And he said, now there is no place for me over here. Thank you very much, my dear Dhritarashtra, that by insulting me in this way, you have freed me of the commitment that I had to my brother Dhritarashtra and to the throne of Hastinapur. And Vidur immediately goes on pilgrimage, and then we see that wonderful interaction Vidur has with Maitreya Rishi, and meets Uddhav, makes an immense spiritual advancement. Why? All that because he was able to take a material situation and use it for spiritual benefit. So one of the things that Prabhupada asks us to do is that when we are in a material situation that is adverse, then just like Mahatma Vidur, just like Parikshit Maharaj, we can also think that, oh Lord, for so many lifetimes I have uselessly wasted running after temporary material pursuits. Now by some extraordinary good fortune, I have come in contact with the devotees, and with firm faith and determination, I will hold on to the lotus feet to make my way back to you. In the third canto, Lord Kapila, he says that this is the same kind of regret that the jiva expresses when the jiva is in the womb of the mother. And he does not, that regret goes away when it comes in contact with matter, but that is the kind of regret that will help us. So this is regret in the mode of pure goodness. So one can regret in the mode of ignorance also. That what is the point? This life is waste. Nothing I can do. I'm a failure. So that is regret that's going in the mode of ignorance. But this is regret in the mode of pure goodness, because the end result is that we convert Krishna's external energy into internal energy. So what happens to the person now that he has embarked on this path of enlightenment? So I'll stop here to see if there is any questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. Prabhu, I just have a question regarding the verses where it says, the Virat Rupa, and also following that Brahman realization. In that verse, one can easily argue that, because Prabhupada translates it into a seeing the Lord, realizing the Lord, but actually the verse says Brahma Darshanam. So one can easily argue that impersonalistic philosophy. So Sutta Goswami actually meant only the impersonal nature of the absolute truth, not the personal feature. How can we defend? How can we, make our position stronger and clearer?
So you're talking about verse 33, right?
Yes, Prabhu.
So 33. So the word, the word, at least if you look at the word-to-word translation, Brahma Darshanam is translated. Darshanam is, of course, seeing, and Brahma is the absolute. So my understanding is, not being a scholar of Sanskrit, my understanding is that a lot of this is context sensitive. So Brahma Darshanam literally translates into seeing the absolute. Now in the context of the verse, it is that both the gross and the subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, and the person sees something beyond it. So in the context, the gross has been compared to the Virat Roop, the subtle has been compared to the impersonal Brahman. So beyond the Virat Roop and the subtle, which is the Brahman realization, what is the absolute form of Krishna that one sees? And then the acharyas, they basically point to the so this verse talks about the Paramatma realization. So then it talks about Paramatma. So we had spoken about the Virat Roop, we had spoken about the Brahman realization, and this verse, the Brahma Darshanam, it talks about the Paramatma realization. at least the way that I would explain it is that the translation of Brahma Darshan is sensitive to the context that is established by the previous two verses.
Okay, Prabhu. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Please accept my humble obeisances, Prabhu. I have a question, Prabhu. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that tata dehantara prapti. So only at the time of death one can attain another material body or a fully spiritual body. But we often see that like Prabhupada, when he was in the planet, his body was spiritual. But at the same time, conditioned souls were able to see him. So he, though he was self-realized, he we can say that his body and his soul, everything is spiritual. But the conditioned souls were able to see him. And same case with Krishna, when he was in the planet, he was spiritual completely, but there were a lot of conditioned souls who were not able to understand him, were still able to see him. So it looks like simultaneously they are able to exist in both spiritual as well as material bodies. I'm a little confused here. So Bhagavad Gita, he says only at the time of death or after death one can attain pure self. But in this verse or the previous verse 1334, it said that by knowledge, when the illusion is removed, one can directly see the pure self, and because he clearly knows he is not the subtle or the gross. So it looks like even before the death, we can see our pure self.
That is correct. Where in Bhagavad Gita it says that only at the time of death, tatha dhyanta praptira dhiras tatra namoyati, that talks about transmigration. It doesn't talk about material and spiritual. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada, he makes this point that there is actually no difference. This is in a purport, not a verse. There's no difference between matter and spirit, ritual. The only difference is in the conception. So it's not that if something is spiritual, means that we cannot see it. We may not be able to appreciate it. The deity is a classic example. The deity is completely spiritual. Everybody can see it, but very few people can appreciate it. Everybody went and took darshan of Lord Jagannath, but when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took darshan, he became ecstatic because he was able to see the deity in the original form. And then at one point Prabhupada says that in this very lifetime, in this very body, one can attain spiritual liberation. In a moment's notice, one can attain spiritual liberation. So death is by no means a prerequisite for spiritual emancipation. It may be a step in which the soul, if it is liberated, decides to leave the material realm and go back to the spiritual. They can continue in the material realm to continue with the service to Krishna, because death itself is a material event. How can something material result in something spiritual, right? What actually converts us from being conditioned soul to be not conditioned souls is our relationship with Krishna. Nothing to do with the fact that that we have to die before that, or we have to become invisible, or anything like that.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Saran Prabhu.
No business, yes, Prabhu. Prabhu, the body, the Virat Roop that Krishna left at Prabhash, we talked sometime about this also. What will we say in this context?
It's a good question, Prabhu. So what Prabhupada says is, actually in one of the lectures to this verse, he says that when Sutta Goswami was drawing this analogy of the soul within the Virat Roop, right? So he's saying the Virat Roop is completely material, the soul is spiritual. When the soul leaves the body, then it does not carry the material body along with it. It leaves the material body. So similarly, when Krishna came, the material world is his Virat Roop. And when he came to the material world, then his body was a representation of the Virat Roop. So just like the Virat Roop is material, it has no spiritual component, the material body of Krishna's body was material. So when he went back to the spiritual world, he left the material world behind, he left the Virat Roop behind, he left the body behind. That's one understanding. Second understanding Prabhupada gives is that he left it to bewilder the atheists. That just as Krishna has a responsibility to encourage his devotees, he also has a responsibility to increase the faith of the atheists in their atheistic view. So they will have something to say that Krishna died like an ordinary mortal. He left, he's left his body, I leave his body. So Krishna is also material. Third explanation that is given by, again, by Prabhupada and another place is that if you consider Krishna's body to be spiritual, then just like Krishna, when he left the planet, he left behind Vrindavan, he left behind Govardhan, he left behind Yamuna. All these places are fully spiritual. So in the same way, he left behind his body to inspire future devotees. It does not mean that Krishna has only one body. If he can have many bodies, Krishna can have infinite bodies. It's not that he left his body is without a body, no. But he left his body because he wanted it to be a place of pilgrimage, which actually, if you've been to Prabhash Kshetra, then that place is not very much visited. There is a samadhi over there and a small temple over there. But when I'd gone to Dwarka, I'd gone to Prabhash Kshetra, and I was kind of surprised that there's really nothing over there. Given the fact that one would consider the Krishna's bodies over here, people would come. Millions of people come to Vrindavan. For every million people that come to Vrindavan, one person may go to Prabhash Kshetra. It's kind of interesting how Krishna's energies are acting.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. So we will continue with the next verse, 1335. Evan janmani karmani haya karturagya sacha varnayati sma kavyo veda guyanti hritapate. Thus learned men describe the births and activities of the unborn and inactive, which is undiscoverable even in the Vedic literatures. He is the Lord of the Hunt. So previously Sutta Goswami had spoken about the evolving process of enlightenment. And in two verses, 35 and 36, he talks about the next progressive stage of realization. So from studying the Bhagavad Gita, we know that when the verses start talking about a lot of seemingly contradictory things, that the birth of the unborn, the activities of the inactive, that he is far but he is near, he is nowhere but he is everywhere, then which form of Krishna are we talking about at that time? We are talking about Krishna in his Paramatma form. So this verse continues to talk about Krishna in the Paramatma form. So it starts with Evam. So thus, so evam means that there is a conclusion. So you say, this is happening, thus we can understand this is the cause of it. So in the previous verse, Sutta Goswami had said that how the material energy, which is binding, can be changed to spiritual simply by changing one's conception, one's attitude. Such people are kaviya. Such people are learned, and thus these people move to the next progressive stage of realization, which is Paramatma realization. So the fact that they're talking about Hritapate, the Lord of the heart. So this is an adjective that is very frequently used for Paramatma, because he resides in the heart. So Jiva Goswami in Bhagavad Sandarbha, he says that by studying the text 33, one becomes free from the ignorance of identifying with the gross and the subtle body. And 34 explains that when the illusory energy subsides, then one begins to perceive the spiritual form. Finally, text 35 indicates that one who takes pleasure in the Supreme Self describes the births and activities of the Super Soul or the Lord in the heart. So when the material conception subsides, then the transcendental treasure of directly perceiving the Lord's birth and activities become manifest. And thus we can understand the Lord is full of pastimes and spiritual bliss. So as I mentioned, this verse talks in terms of riddles to demonstrate the inconceivable nature of the Lord. That he is unborn, but he is born. He is inactive, but he performs active. The Vedas are meant to reveal him, yet his Veda Guyani, undescribable even in the Vedic literature. He is outside and inside, near and far. So he is none other than our dear Paramatma. And by understanding the nature of the Paramatma, many of these apparent contradictions are automatically resolved. That the Paramatma is one, but appears in many places. The Paramatma is in our heart, but there is a Paramatma of the universe also, that is outside. There is a Paramatma of the material creation also, that sustains the entire material creation. Karnodaksha Vishnu. There is Garbhodaksha Vishnu, who is the Paramatma of the material universes. And there is Shuddhaksha Vishnu, who is the Paramatma within our heart. Same personality, but within and outside. Okay, so this verse is introduced us to, so from Virat Roop, we went to Brahman realization. From Brahman realization, we have gone to Paramatma realization. Now let's look at the next verse, 1.3.36. Savaidam Vishwam Amogalila Sajate Avate Atina Sajate Yasmin Bhuteshu Chanaritatma Tantraha Shad Vargikam Jigrati Sadgunesha. The Lord, whose activities are always spotless, is the master of the six senses and is fully omnipotent with six opulences. He creates the material universes, maintains them, and annihilates them without being in the least affected. He is within every living being and is also independent. So continuing description of the of the Paramatma, that Krishna, he creates, maintains, and annihilates everything without being affected. And from the Bhagavad Gita, we know how he does that. The reason that he's not affected is that he's never involved. He does all of that, but he's the non-doer because he is forever detached. He's within every living entity, but then one might think that if Krishna is within me, when my body dies, does the Paramatma also die? One might think that when the body takes birth, does the Paramatma take birth along with the body? But actually he is fully independent. So rather than Krishna being dependent on the body is dependent on Krishna. By the presence of the Paramatma, the body takes birth, and when the Paramatma leaves the body, at the time the body dies. So, so Sutta Goswami, so whenever the topic of Paramatma is introduced, because the Paramatma is so intricately associated with the material world, then the acharyas will always make this point, that they will try to prevent, they will try their best to make sure that we don't confuse this very intricate association between Krishna and the Paramatma Roop and the material world to mean that they are one and the same. One should never think that Garbhodaksha Vishnu is the material universe, or Karnodaksha Vishnu is the material creation, or Shiradaksha Vishnu is the material body. So the dependence is of us on Krishna in the Paramatma Roop, not the other way around. And the example that is given is that even though Krishna is doing everything, he's creating, maintaining, annihilating, supporting, fulfilling our desires. He's the Upadrastanu Mantasta Varta Bhokta Maheshwara. So he's giving us permission, he is executing our desires. So he's very, very intricately involved in the material world, but he always remains completely spiritual. He's never dependent on the material conception, rather the other way around. The reason that the soul can manipulate matter is because of the Paramatma. The soul itself has no way to manipulate matter. The soul does not know how to manipulate matter. It's the Paramatma that takes the desire of the soul and translates that into the various manipulations of the material energy. So Prabhupada points out that he is called Amogha Leela, which indicates that there is nothing lamentable in his creation. But yet, the material world is called a place of misery. So Prabhupada says that those who create disturbance in his creation are themselves disturbed. So the material world is lamentable because we are lamentable, not because the material world is lamentable. Same point that was made, that there is no difference between the material and spiritual energy. The only difference is the way that we perceive it. Within the same material conception, there was Srila Prabhupada, the 6 Goswamis, who were enjoying the highest mellows of spirituality, and there are so many other living entities within the same material creation who are suffering from their senses and who are suffering from the trials and tribulations of the material world. So, Gurujan Prabhu also makes the point that Sutta Goswami speaks this verse also to indicate to us that we can never become the super soul. So, when the living entity becomes free of illusion, which is what the verse is saying, then does it become one with the super soul? So Gurujan Prabhu says that one must understand that the constitutional position is never changed. And what's the constitutional position? That of dependence. Whether we are conditioned or whether we are liberated, we are always dependent. We can never become the Paramatma, but we will always be dependent on the Paramatma. Okay, next verse, 1337. न चास्य कश्चिन् पुनेन धातुर् अवेति जन्तु कुमान् शाउति नामानि रूपानि मनोवचोभि सन्तन्वतो न तुयो चर्यामि भाग्यः. The foolish, with a poor fund of knowledge, cannot know the transcendental nature of the forms, name, and activities of the Lord, who is playing like an actor in a drama. Nor can they express such things, neither in speculation nor in their words. So Sutta Goswami, so far, he has been talking about the path of enlightenment, successive enlightenment. One who sees the Virat Roop, one who sees Paramatma, one who understands the nature of the relationship with the Paramatma. So now in two verses, 37 and 38, he talks about those who are not able to develop that vision. So here he talks about those with a poor fund of knowledge who cannot understand the Naam, Roop, Gun and Leela of the Lord. So Sutta Goswami in the previous verses, he has been trying to explain the contradictions about Krishna. That how Krishna is, that we try to understand one who cannot be understood through the Vedas. We try to capture one who cannot be captured by the mind of the greatest yogis. So one will question that if actually Krishna is beyond comprehension, then what's the point of the Bhagavatam? Because the idea of the scriptures, the idea of us studying the Bhagavatam is to try and understand Krishna. So Sutta Goswami is saying that Bhagavatam will reveal Krishna to you if you're not Agya or Kumansa. So Agya means foolish and Kumansa. So Kumansa means, Ku means, whenever there is Ku, it means bad. And Mansa is mentality. So or if you have a bad mentality. So if you're Agya, if you're foolish, or if you're Kumansa, if you have a poor fund of our knowledge, you will fail to understand Krishna. But if you're not that, then Bhagavatam is for you. Bhagavatam will reveal Krishna to you. So the Agya are the karmis, the foolish people, the muras, who do not want to spend time trying to understand spirituality. The Kumansa are the Gyanis. That Mansa, they have the knowledge, but they use it improperly. So these people, they may try to describe the names or the forms or the activities of Krishna, but to them it will always be inconceivable. They will always ask these questions. Why is Krishna running after the wives of other men? That why is Krishna marrying 16,000 women? In one of the Bhagavad Saptas given by Radha Govind Maharaj, he was sharing this, that once he was speaking about Krishna Leela, and then a couple from the crowd came to him, and the wife said that, I like whatever you're saying, but I could not understand that why was Krishna running after other people's wives? And then Radha Govind Maharaj says that I tried to explain to them that essentially everybody is Krishna's energy. So Krishna was running after his own energy. So then he said, the husband started saying, yeah, but it is not fair to run after other people's women, other people's wives, other women. He should have been satisfied with his own wife. So Radha Govind Maharaj said that I turned to him and I said that, what's your problem? He was not running after your wife, right? So you should not be worried about that. So, and he said that, they didn't know what to say. And the point Radha Govind Maharaj was trying to say, that some people with a poor fund of knowledge or because of their kumansa, they will never be able to understand Krishna's activities. And to some extent, Krishna's activities are there to separate the milk and the water. He presents this Amog Leela. He presents this inconceivable pastimes so that the people with faith can surrender to it, and the people who lack faith will automatically distill away from it. So the example over here that is given is of a person, like a person playing a role in an actor playing in a drama. So sometimes people go and see a cinema, they'll confuse the actor with the role. So the person who's the hero, he may be playing a very valiant role, and then they'll say, oh, this actor is very valiant. Like sometimes, especially in India, the heroes are given like larger than life persona, and not because they have anything special, but because they play that role, and then people confuse the two, between the role and the person. So similarly, the fruitive workers and the mental speculators, they confuse the leelas with the leela with the personality. Like Krishna came as Varaha, and then they say, how can God be a boar? Krishna comes as Matsya, and then how can God be a fish? So they confuse the actor with the role. So this is also in a way a warning to us that the people who are in this category, who are fruitive workers and mental speculators. So Sutta Goswami says that they will not be able to express Krishna in their speculations or their words. So which means the warning to us is that we should not be ourselves confused by it. Right? We see so many versions of Bhagavad Gita which is trying to interpret Krishna in different ways. That Krishna represents the mind, and Arjun represents something, and the horses represent the senses. So many ways that people try to do it. So this is the way that the karmis and the jnanis, they are trying to interpret Krishna's Leela because they don't have access to it. But the guidance to us is not to become confused by it. So I'll stop over here. I was hoping to finish the chapter. This has 7 more verses, but I don't want to rush through them. They're not very. So these verses we can do fairly quickly, but I think I still want to do justice to them, especially the last 5 verses that are glorification to the Bhagavatam. So I'll stop over here and see if there are any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, it's just a comment. It's like the Isopanishad a bit, no? The progression.
In the Isopanishad, yes, the super soul is talked about in a similar way. That everywhere are his hands and feet and his eyes. He is inside us, but he is also outside. Exactly, the inconceivable nature of the super soul is presented there. Okay, do we have any other questions?
Prabhuji, my question I still haven't formed really in my head, but I hope I can try to see what I'm thinking. So like I'm just trying to see the verses, like how they are connected to each other, like after. So like 32 is talking about Brahman, then 34 talks about.
So I can go over it again. So 30 and 31, they talk about Virat Roop. Then 32 to 34, they talk about Brahman realization. 35 to 39, they talk about Paramatma and Bhagwan. So that's the progression.
Oh, okay, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So this verse 1337, the translation talks about the forms, names, and activities of the Lord. So I was just thinking, generally people, especially kids and women, they are more attracted towards the pastimes of the Lord, especially the childhood pastimes, because there is a lot of cuteness in the activities. But we see the general people, they don't recognize the name or even form. We can say they adore the form and the pastimes, but the name is not so much recognized by general public. So if some let's say a common man, he or she is very much interested in pastimes, hearing the pastimes, and appreciating the form of the Lord, not in a spiritual sense, but just for the beauty sake, the beauty of the Lord's body, or the beauty of what He has done in terms of activities, but not recognizing the name. So they are in a kind of a dilemma situation where, is it enough just to appreciate the form and the pastimes and not fully recognize the name? What would happen to such people, Prabhu?
Thank you, Prabhu. So in a way, these are all hooks that Krishna drops in the material world to attract us. So as you mentioned, so there are some who are attracted to Krishna Lila, and that's how they develop faith. There are some who are attracted to the form of Krishna. Form of Krishna basically means deity. So they're attracted to going to a temple, appreciating Krishna's deity form. That's why in temples, the deities are so gorgeously decorated, so that people look at them and they get attracted to them. And there are people who are attracted to kirtan. People who will sit for hours into kirtan, listen to it, play a cassette in the car, and they will listen to the name. So all of them are ways that Krishna makes himself available to us. They're all equally potent for a devotee. And so now we're looking at it from one who sees it from a spiritual perspective. The progression is Nam, Roop, Gun, Leela. So when we chant, we first develop attraction to the name. Through the name, as a meditation intensifies, it moves to the transcendental form of Krishna. So Nam, Roop. Then our meditation further intensifies, and we start appreciating the qualities of Krishna, Gun. And then highest stage of meditation is Leela. But this is a different kind of Leela. This is not just appreciation of Leela, but participation in the Leela. So we see that in the case of the 6 Goswamis, especially Rupa Sanatan, sometimes when they would chant, then the chanting would be so intense that through the process of chanting, they would be transported into the spiritual world, and they would find themselves either witnessing Krishna's Leela or even participating in Krishna's Leela. So for devotees, there is a certain amount of succession that we chant so that we can appreciate Krishna's form, and from form we start appreciating his qualities and then his pastimes. But for everybody else who's sincerely looking, all these are more or less on the same platform. They're basically Krishna trying to attract the mind of the conditioned soul, and just like he does so many other things. He appears in the form of philosophy. In Bhagavad Gita, he appears as a spiritual master. So many ways that he appears. So these are again ways that Krishna appears and makes himself available.
Just a follow-up question, Prabhu. So I have seen people, if you ask them to chant, they're not ready to chant. Even if you ask them to be in the kirtan, they're not very much inclined, but um, they just like to hear the pastimes of Krishna. It's more in a material way, just like to appreciate the cuteness. And some people, they don't even like the way the Krishna is dressed in a ISKCON kind of fashion, especially those coming from South India. They don't appreciate that kind of dressing and the way the deities are worshipped. So there are different categories of people, but when it comes to pastimes, there is a common, except for the language which the speaker uses. If the speaker uses English, which is more of a universal language, whatever background they are coming from, they try to appreciate, but they don't equally appreciate the name or the form because it is in a different kind of mood. And so that was my whole context of the question.
Right, and I agree with you. So I'm just taking it one step further. That you're right. There are many people when Ramayana and Mahabharata was played in India, people who probably had no interest in chanting or who never wanted to go to the temple, they were probably still switching on the TV and watching it just because the pastimes are there. So this is one yet another way of Krishna to attract devotees. So one of the verses that Srila Prabhupada is kind of a Prabhupada verse that he composed. He compiled it himself from different verses. Yena kena prakarena mana Krishna mana niveshayat sarvavidhi nishedhayor etayoreva kinkara. So this is basically instructions from Narad Muni, but Srila Prabhupada kind of compiled the verse that yena kena prakarena, that somehow or the else, one way or the other, mana Krishna mana niveshayat. If you can get somebody's mind to Krishna, sarvavidhi nishedhayor etayoreva kinkara. That everything else, all other rules and regulations, etayoreva kinkara, are subservient to this. So as Krishna preaches to us, he practices himself. He is also yena kena prakarena. That's one way or the other, he is trying to get our attention. That is why Krishna comes to the material world and performs all these pastimes. Part of it is that he's associating with his devotees, but he could associate with them in the spiritual world. The reason he descends to the material world is that when he leaves behind his pastimes. That can attract the heart of the most materially minded person, and somehow or else they will develop some appreciation of Krishna, or they might say the name of Krishna, or they might appreciate some quality of Krishna, and that's how their devotional life begins.
Thank you, Prabhu. Just one more thing I wanted to share. So I had one person who came and told me that I'm not interested in chanting. I would just like to hear about the pastimes, because even if you see in Srimad Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj or Arjun, they got perfected because they just heard the pastimes. They didn't do any chanting. So that is the argument they keep, and they say, I don't need to chant the names of Krishna, I just need to hear pastimes, because you yourself have a person in your scripture that says just by hearing he got perfection. So why do I need to chant?
And they're right.
Whole
they are right in the sense that Parikshit Maharaj, he got perfection through Shravanam, through hearing, and if that's what helps them develop faith, then that's what they should do. Better for them to do that than, so if a person is not able to chant, better for him to hear the pastimes of Krishna. Eventually he will chant, right? Because that's the nature of devotional service, that once it establishes itself in one's heart, then it will automatically grow. So as devotees, we know that when Parikshit Maharaj was hearing, the quality of his hearing is a lot different from the quality of the hearing that this particular person or even we can do. So when Parikshit Maharaj was hearing, he was hearing as if his life depended on it. When Arjuna heard the instructions of Krishna, then what was the very next thing he did? He acted upon those instructions. It's not that Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna in the Kurukshetra, and then Arjuna reached forward and switched off the television and went and watched a movie, right? It's not that he did that. Right after that, he took out his bow and arrow, and for 18 days, he fought. He lost his own son, but yet he continued to serve Krishna. So he acted on that instruction. So the quality of the hearing of Arjun or Parikshit Maharaj or the sages of Naimisharanya is a lot different than what is the quality that this person is talking about. But nevertheless, and that is the whole purpose, nevertheless, if that's what attracts him, then that's what he should put his faith in. You should say you hear more about Krishna's pastimes. Hear from an authorized source. There is this book called The Light of the Bhagavad. There is this book called the Srimad Bhagavatam as a collection of stories that is written by Purna Pragya Prabhu, which is just the stories of the Bhagavatam. All Prabhupada's stories, well, based on what Prabhupada has said, but just stories from Bhagavatam. So read those. As they read it, if they're reading it without offense, then next time you meet them, they will be chanting. Yeah?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so I'll end over here. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anantakoti Vaishnavrind ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Tagore Premanande. Hare Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.